Right, hey guys, this video is hopefully going to help you with outcome 3 artist practice. Examine the practice of at least 2 artists with reference to 2 artworks by each artist, referencing the different historical and cultural context of each artwork. So I've made a little PDF here of some possible questions that might appear in your stack. They're pretty basic questions with some artworks that are obviously different to the artists and artworks that we've chosen, but just to help you give some context to those sort of questions and the sort of responses that I'd be looking for. So an example question here, all the questions are worth 5 marks each. So describe the materials and techniques used by the artist and how they help contribute to the aesthetic qualities of the artwork. So I guess the first thing I'd be expecting you guys to do is break down that question. So we know that there's a description word at the start, so describe. Then we're obviously looking at the materials and techniques that contribute to the aesthetic qualities. So I've underlined that. And of the artwork is really important because often it's overlooked. When it says any question like this, or any question at all in your SAC, needs to make explicit references to elements of the artwork or aspects of the artwork. The use of found objects here, in particular buttons and small round objects, draw extra attention to the textures and the feel and the mood of the artwork. I need to hear those explicit references. I might focus on talking about the eyes or how the shape of the hair, being simple black lines, gives even more emphasis to the round textured face and the mood and the feeling of the artwork. So if this was a question in your SAC, it's worth 5 marks. So I want you to reference the materials and techniques. I might sort of attribute that to 2 marks. The aesthetic qualities would go to 2 marks. And the 5th mark, I'm probably putting down to how well you use your visual language overall. So what I mean by that is a question like this. So you're talking about the materials. So our materials here, it's mixed media. So we can see that there's a variety of materials used all over the place. Techniques can range from how those materials are brought together. So the fact that they're probably glued on, that there's been some sort of color scheme had to be identified but prior. Techniques such as creating multiple layers of line here, etc. So used by the artists and how they help contribute to the aesthetic qualities. So the meanings, the messages, the elements, and the principles. And what I'm really hoping you do in these sort of questions is link those 3 components together. So the materials, the techniques, and the aesthetic qualities, linking them together in sentences. So instead of saying, describe the materials and starting off with, the artist has used, so Jane Perkins has used found mixed media objects to create a face of a girl. That's a really low answer. The artist has used found objects such as, you can see some buttons, beads, whatever else you might want to list, color coordinated to represent the figure of it's probably Middle Eastern, considering she's got some sort of headpiece on. It could be wrong though. It could just be, Robin Hood, not Robin Hood, the girl with the basket. You know the one. So I guess I'm just looking for linking those together with the meanings and messages. So the artist has used found objects such as buttons, beads, etc. To create high quality tone to help contribute to the intense stare being given off by the female subject in the artwork. And then I'd start to launch into how the elements and principles, the limited use of color, yet bold color, helps create the feeling of, whatever we want to talk about with the red being the headpiece and what that changes. So hopefully that's a little touch base of how that example might look, or that might sound. We'll go on to the next one now. So referring to specific aspects of the artwork and subject matter, how are the artist's influence evident in the materials and techniques or meaning and messages? So quite a complex question. I'd want you to break that down, and I've done that for you here. So referring to specific aspects of the artwork and subject matter. So I need to reference this person. I need to reference the artwork. How is the artist influences? So what are the influences? This is where the research comes in. How has this artist learnt this technique? Is it a photograph? Is it a painting? Is this a typical style? Are these colors influenced by the artist's feeling at that time? It's really important that you do your research on your artist and the artwork you're choosing. Evident in the materials and techniques or meaning and messages. Now, why that's important to break that down is because some artists have huge influences in the way that they draw, paint, photograph, whatever, such as Kaws. We know that he learnt some drawing techniques through like a film comic school, and that influenced his artworks. The meaning and messages, they could be influences such as political messages, cultural messages. You might want to link them back into the cultural and historical relevance or influences of that person and that artwork. So, you know, this topic, this SAC, you know what the artists, the artworks are, and you know who the artists are. So it's expected that you do a fair amount of research into the artworks that you're talking about. So if this was, I don't know this artist well, but I might want to reference specific, so the subject matter. So the female figure in the artwork is influenced by Miller's feminist background, wanting to represent the delicate features of a woman through that soft, gentle touch against the cheek, yet the clashing colors of one side being bright and colorful and a darker area on this side, starting to convey that there's a toughness to women that needs to be brought out, yet softness. So do you see what I'm trying to say? Like, I don't know what the influences are, but I'm making it up as I go. So I focused on the meaning and the messages of the influence of the artist. If I wanted to look at the materials and the techniques, then I would obviously look at, the quick splotchy brush strokes used by the artist, help convey quite a colorful personality, which could allude to whatever that might be. So that influence is. This one here, so choose an element and a principle evident in the artwork that aids in the meaning and messages being conveyed by the artist. So this is a really simple question, and we're focusing on an element, a principle, the meanings and messages being conveyed by the artist. But again, it requires you to do a fair bit of research on the artwork that you're looking at. So an element from this, probably form, a principle, it's quite balanced. I might want to talk about that. And the meaning and messages would be, recycled objects being represented as a tree that needs to be ripped down, and why they've chosen form for that. And again, I've made that meaning and message up, and you guys won't be doing that for the SAC, but the fact that it's a tree and it's recycled materials has some irony about the amount of trees that we pull down, etc., and going on from there. This is a kind of question that I would probably give you, this would probably be about 3 marks for your elements and your principles linking to your meanings and messages, and that 2 marks what I'd be expecting is to show some really good research, even bringing in the cultural historical context of the artwork into this one, which I'll go into a bit further in a second. So the next artwork here, this is not a question that you would get. So discuss the cultural context of the artwork, but it's one of the main topics of this whole SAC that we really need to start to get our head around. So the cultural context, we know if we're looking at historical context, it refers to a time and place. If we're looking at the cultural context, then we are obviously referring to the political messages, the environmental messages, those sort of things. So it comes down to you understanding the meanings and the messages from the artworks that we're looking at, and then being able to convey this. So discuss the cultural context. It could have just said discuss the context of this artwork, but I've written cultural context because the historical context is probably a little bit black and white. We understand this is Ned Kelly. He played a big role in Australian history, so we'd be able to talk about that easy, but the cultural context is probably the part that we need to get our head around a little bit further. Um, the idea is that I guess you guys have a good understanding of what context each artwork fits in, and we know that they're probably going to fit into both, but one more than the other. So when we're talking about our artworks, you've only got four. You should know inside and out what the cultural context of each artwork could be, and then be able to talk about them either in comparison to another artwork, which you might need to do in the SAC, or in relation to the influences or the subject matter of the artists that they focused on. Last part of this slide is the Studio Art school-based coursework performance descriptors. So I guess from this, you're all aiming for that far right column, so the very high area. And they're the areas that I formulate the questions from. So comprehensive and insightful examination of different historical and cultural contexts into two artworks by each artist. So you know there's going to be cultural and historical context questions about the artworks. Comprehensive explanation and discussion of the subject matter. So what's in the artwork, influences, so researching of what influences they might have had, communication of ideas, and meanings in the artwork by each artist. Sophisticated and insightful analysis of the artist's use of materials, techniques, and processes with detailed reference to a range of artworks. So they're the artworks we're choosing. Comprehensive analysis of the artist's use of elements and principles that demonstrate aesthetic qualities in two artworks by each artist. Evidence of extensive research and insightful discussion of art practices with consistent and confident use of appropriate terminology. So I have to formulate the questions based off, I guess, this criteria. And I was able to do that in probably 3 or 4 questions. So the advantage for you guys is, I'll slightly alter questions, but it's a hard SAC to follow if you're able to get 1 mark on every question because it will have ticked off the criteria. What it does mean is there's not an extensive amount of criteria. If you look at sort of break down those words of context, so the historical and cultural, subject matter, influences, meanings and messages, we could tie a lot of these up into aesthetic quality type questions. So it's important to get your head around this criteria here, as well as making sure after you've watched this video that you feel like you can answer those sort of questions based on the research that you're doing on your artworks. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Next lesson we'll go into some explicit sort of examples of opening sentences that you might want to use or styles that you might want to write with that help you tick off a lot of the question early on and then expand on it, and trying to use the visual language and appropriate terminology as best as you can.